Hey, welcome back to Intermediate Java. It's been a bumpy couple days, but it's good to be back communicating again and getting the class going again. So today we're going to be talking about inheritance. So we're going to first start with a little lecture talking about the properties of inheritance, and then we're going to have a coding example that we're going to do together. So the first thing about inheritance is this key design principle that we talk about is a versus has a. So every time we work with an object, we're going to think about, is this relationship an is a relationship or is it a has a relationship? So for student, student has a name or student is a name. Of course, we're going to say student has a name. So go through the rest of those in your head, get your answers. Okay, so a student is a person, a student has a teacher has a group of students, and a teacher is a person. If you can do that, you can actually break out and understand the difference between inheritance, what we're learning today, and then the concept of properties, which we've learned previously. So instance variables, the properties of an object, or a has a relationship. For example, we had coded a book once. A book has a name, it has a title, it has an author, it has a number of pages. Those are all instance variables or object level variables. But inheritance is going to model an is a relationship. So a teacher is a person. So that's going to be a different relationship that we're going to model differently that we're going to see today. Every class in Java inherits properties and behaviors from its superclass. So if a person had some properties and behaviors, when we have a teacher inherit from that, it's going to have some of those same properties and behaviors that inherit from it just as a matter of course. And the superclass, by the way, is the parent class of any class. And we use inheritance just really to simplify code. We can abstract away a fair amount of complexity. So how do we specify the superclass? There is this extends keyword in Java that we haven't seen yet. So when you declare a class, we've done public class student before, things like that. We can add this extra phrase, extends person. And that's saying, okay, person is the superclass of student. And so now we're defining that relationship where student is a person. Every object, regardless of whether you put extends in the object definition, actually extends something. If you don't put the word extends there, the object by default extends object. Object is the root object of the hierarchy of all objects in Java. Everything descends from object in some way, shape, or form. It might be a parent, it might be a grandparent, it might be a great-great-great-grandparent, but at some point walking up the inheritance tree, you eventually hit the object class. The object class defines two methods that we're familiar with and a couple others that we haven't seen yet. ToString is one of them, and ToString just outputs the address of the object, and we often override it. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then equals, that's for doing comparison. We use that for strings. So here's just a sample hierarchy. So everything, again, descends from object. And so we could have a vehicle class that extends from the class called object. And then we could have basically a sibling of that called person. Person also extends from object. And then we could have student and also teacher extend from person. So a teacher is a person, and a teacher is also an object. So going up the tree, you are whatever is above you in that tree. You could think of this also as a Venn diagram. So an object defines some behaviors like ToString and equals, among others. And then a person extends an object, so it's a superset of it. So a person could have a name, still have a get name, things like that. But a person still has ToString and equals. And then a student might add grade level, grades, things like that, to the person object. So a student extends person, it adds some more attribute, but a student is still a person, and a person is still an object. So we're kind of like continuing to add layers of complexity and interest as we go down the hierarchy. Okay, next key aspect, you've asked about this many times in the past. We've been using this word public all the time. And there are some other access, so this is called an access modifier, and it controls who can see this method or this field. So we've talked about that for fields in our objects before. And so public is the top level, meaning everybody can see it. Private means that nobody outside this class can see it. And now there's going to be another access modifier that we're going to add in the middle called protected, which means subclasses can see it and other classes in the same package, but no one else. So we've had public before, we've had private before, and so now we're adding protected, which is kind of like an in-between one. We're not going to see that much in this class, but it's at least worth mentioning. Okay, overriding is a key concept. So a superclass might define some method, and then a subclass can decide to change the behavior of that method. And this is called overriding. And this happens when a subclass creates a method with the exact same name and exact same parameter types as the one in the superclass. Once you do that, whenever the subclass's method of that type is called, the subclass method is called rather than the superclass method. And we've actually done this before. If you recall, sometimes we forget to implement toString, and then when we print an object, we will just see the address of the object, and that's not terribly interesting most of the time. So the way that we fix this is we implement toString. So what we're actually doing is overriding the object class's definition of toString with our own alternate implementation that provides more interesting information. And finally, there's one new keyword called super, which some of you saw in preparing for the lab. So just like this refers to the current object, super refers to the parent of the current object. So it just gives us a way to reference up the tree. And we use it in two different ways. One is sometimes in the constructor we want to call the superclass objects constructor. So this is a mechanism to do that. We will see that when we practice. And then the other way we use super is to call a method in the superclass that's been overridden in the current class. We're not going to see an example of that today, but that's really the only other case we really use this. So at this point, we're going to code an example. I'm going to code it just like I would in class. Your task is to code along. And after class, you just need to submit the code along to show that you completed it. So actually, we're going to break this into two videos. So we're going to stop this video here, and then you can watch the second video for the code along.